On the morning of March 3rd, 1949, in a factory on Chicago's South Side, an assembly line that had built one of the most advanced automobiles in American history simply stopped. And it never started again. Because the man who built it had just been accused of running the entire company as a fraud. And by the time a jury cleared his name, there was nothing left to clear it for. And that single collapse is only the first of 5 stories about cars that were here one year and gone the next. Cars that were engineered brilliantly, sold beautifully, and then erased almost overnight by forces that had very little to do with whether they were good machines, because in the history of the automobile industry, being ahead of your time has killed almost as many companies as being behind it. And Preston Tucker learned that lesson faster and more brutally than almost anyone, since his Tucker 48, nicknamed the Torpedo, arrived in a country starving for something new after 4 years of wartime rationing, offering a rear-mounted 6-cylinder engine, a padded dashboard, a windshield designed to pop out on impact, and a third headlight mounted in the center of the nose that swiveled with the steering wheel to illuminate a turn before the driver had even finished making it. Features so far ahead of Detroit's offerings that they read today like a checklist of safety technology that wouldn't become standard for another generation, and the public loved it. But Tucker had a problem no engineer could fix. Because he needed capital to build cars faster than banks were willing to lend it. So he began selling accessories and dealership franchises to raise money before a single production car had rolled off the line. And that decision caught the attention of the Securities and Exchange Commission, which launched an investigation that accused Tucker of never intending to build a real car at all. A charge that forced the plant to lay off 1,600 workers and grind production to a halt while the case dragged through headlines for the better part of a year. And here's the twist that still fuels documentaries and conspiracy theories decades later. Because in January of 1950, a jury acquitted Tucker and every one of his co-defendants of all charges, finding the fraud allegations baseless. But the acquittal came too late to matter. Since the negative press had already destroyed dealer confidence and evaporated the company's stock value, and only 51 Tucker 48s were ever built before the doors closed for good. Cars so rare today that when one sold at auction in 2012, it brought nearly $3 million, a staggering final verdict on a company that a jury said had done nothing wrong. And while historians still debate whether Detroit's Big Three or a Michigan senator quietly helped smother a dangerous new competitor, most researchers now conclude there's no hard evidence of an organized conspiracy, and that Tucker's own refusal to play by conventional financing rules made him an easy target in an era when Washington was newly aggressive about policing stock fraud. But Tucker wasn't the first company to learn that overreach and bad timing could kill a great car overnight, because more than a decade earlier, a very different kind of automotive empire had already proven the same brutal lesson. And it happened at the height of the Great Depression to a car so radical that when it debuted at the 1936 New York Auto Show, spectators literally climbed onto the bumpers of neighboring vehicles just to get a better look. And that car was the Cord 810, built by a company controlled by the flamboyant industrialist Arat Laban Cord, who by the mid-1930s owned not just the Cord mark, but also Auburn and the ultra-luxury Duesenberg brand, an empire built on the belief that daring engineering could sell cars even when nobody had money to buy them. And the 810 delivered on that promise with front-wheel drive, a feature so unusual that it would remain the last American front-drive passenger car for almost 30 years, along with hidden headlamps that retracted into the fenders, and a hood with no visible seams, a design so futuristic that it would later be exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art. But underneath the striking sheet metal sat a semi-automatic transmission that was notoriously unreliable, and Cord had rushed the car into production to meet the frenzy generated at that auto show, promising 1,000 cars by Christmas when the transmission wasn't even finished. And the resulting mechanical problems, combined with a shrinking dealer network and the crushing weight of a depression economy where luxury cars were a hard sell no matter how advanced they were, meant the 810 and its supercharged 8112 successor never came close to saving the company. And there was one more twist waiting in the wings. Because Cord himself was simultaneously under scrutiny from the Securities and Exchange Commission for questionable stock practices tied to his broader business empire. And under the pressure of that investigation, he sold off his holdings and quietly retired to California just as production ground to a halt in August of 1937, leaving Auburn, Cord, and Duesenberg to file for bankruptcy within months, meaning that three of the most celebrated marques in American automotive history, cars that today sell for well over $100,000 at auction and sometimes far more, disappeared almost simultaneously, victims of financial engineering that proved just as fragile as the transmissions under their hoods. And if Cord's downfall was about a founder outrunning his own ambition, the next vanishing act belonged to a company that never got the chance to fail slowly at all, because it was killed by politics in a way almost no other car in history has been. And that car was the Bricklin SV1, a gull-winged, safety-focused sports car dreamed up by an American entrepreneur named Malcolm Bricklin, who wanted to prove that a car could be both thrilling and nearly indestructible, wrapped in color-impregnated acrylic body panels that never needed painting and reinforced with a steel safety cage, and unable to find a factory willing to build it in the United States, Bricklin struck a deal with the tiny Canadian province of New Brunswick, whose premier, Richard Hatfield, saw the project as a chance to create jobs and put his province on the industrial map. So the government poured in $9 million to get the plant running, but the acrylic panels warped and cracked in sunlight. The promised production numbers never materialized, and Bricklin kept coming back to Hatfield's government, asking for more money, until the province's investment had ballooned past $20 million for a company that had built barely 3,000 cars total. And here is the political gut punch that makes this story so different from every other automaker's collapse. Because Hatfield had been quietly funneling additional funds to Bricklin without fully disclosing it to his own parliament. And when that came out, it triggered a genuine political scandal that damaged his government for years afterward. And by September of 1975, the province finally cut its losses, forcing Bricklin Canada into receivership and shuttering both of its New Brunswick plants within days. A factory that had been built on public money and public hope, gone in what felt to workers like a single afternoon, and Malcolm Bricklin himself filed for personal bankruptcy shortly after. Though remarkably he wasn't finished with the car business, later going on to import the Yugo into the United States in the 1980s, with results that were, if anything, even more famous for their failure. But the story of a car killed by government funding gone wrong is almost gentle compared to what happened next, because the most sensational vanishing act in automotive history didn't involve a bankruptcy filing at all. At least, not at first. It involved cocaine. And it involved a man who had once been the golden boy of General Motors, John Z. Delorean, the engineer credited with helping create the Pontiac GTO before leaving corporate life to build his own dream car, the DMC-12, a stainless steel, gull-winged sports car built in a purpose-built factory outside Belfast, Northern Ireland, funded largely by the British government, which poured in more than £80 million hoping the factory would create thousands of jobs in a region scarred by sectarian violence. And when the car finally launched in 1981, it looked like nothing else on the road. But underneath that dramatic stainless skin sat a modest 130-horsepower Renault-sourced V6 that struggled to justify a price tag approaching $25,000. More than double what an average car cost at the time, and sales badly missed projections while production costs spiraled, and by the fall of 1982, Delorean's company was drowning in debt, exceeding $200 million. And that's when the story takes its most dramatic turn. Because on October 19, 1982, in a Los Angeles hotel room, John Delorean was arrested by federal agents after being caught on hidden camera, appearing to inspect a suitcase filled with cocaine, and calling it, according to the recording, better than gold, in what the FBI said was a scheme to raise $24 million to save his failing company. And the timing could not have been more devastating because his Belfast factory had collapsed into receivership mere hours before his arrest on the other side of the world, meaning the same week saw both his company and his freedom evaporate simultaneously. And yet the story wasn't over. Because at trial,